Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Ostrowski, and I work in Eagle's Environmental Support Division, and I welcome you to our online public meeting tonight on the former Falk Road landfill. I'm glad to see we got about 30 people logged in right now, and I'm sure we'll get several more pop in as they take their time getting logged on. Next slide, please. All right, so I guess you can go to the next one. So can you get to, okay, thanks. So tonight's public meeting, we got a few things going on. We're going to start out with some introductions. Then we're going to, did you want me to go over that agenda really quick, Abby, or not?
Yeah, okay. I'll go back to the agenda.
Okay, just threw me off. All right,
Thanks,
so
Jim.
I'm going to go through some logistics and housekeeping, and then Abby's going to go through introductions, and then we're going to go through an overview of MPART, the health investigations, MPART website, and then we'll do some Q&A. So I want to talk for a minute about housekeeping before I turn it over to Abby. So in terms of housekeeping, all lines are muted. That means you can hear us, but of course we can't hear you at this point. We're going to talk about how to unmute your lines and ask questions when we get to the Q&A part. We are recording this webinar like we do with all our public meetings, and it will go on our YouTube channel. And we'll make sure you all know where to find that when it's done. And of course, you can share that link with others who might not have been able to attend. When it does come time to ask questions, or if you want to ask a question early, you can. We're going to go over Q&A after the presentations, but you can use the Q&A box on your Zoom toolbar and type your question in there. When we get to the questions time tonight, we'll go through those. When we do open it up for questions, you can also click the raise hand icon on your Zoom toolbar, and that'll tell us that you want to voice your question, and we will unmute your mic at that time, and you'll be able to ask your question then. And if you're on the phone, and I did just do an attendee check, and it looks like we do have a few people on the phone calling in and listening in. Of course, you can't see our slides, but if you are on the phone and you have a question, you're just going to hit #2 on your phone, and that'll tell us that your hand is raised, and we will call on you, and you can ask your question that way. And I think that's all I got, Abby, so you can go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Jim. So welcome, everybody. My name is Abby Ndshs. I am the new Executive Director of the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team as of April 1st. So happy to be in this new role. Happy to have you all join us tonight to talk about this important information on the former Falk Road landfill. As Jim said, I'm going to present some stuff on MPART, and then Rosa's going to go through our Department of Health and Human Service slides on the health and potential effects of PFAS. Kim Etheridge is going to give you some site overview and investigation that's been done to date. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. So feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box, and we will answer them all at the very end. Or like Jim said, you can raise your hand at the end and ask questions as you think of them. So not to keep you any longer, but we'll just jump right into it. If you've not heard of what MPART is the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. It was created actually in 2017 under Governor Snyder and endures under Governor Whitmer as an executive order. And it's really a unique agency collaboration, multi-agency approach to collaboration across 7 different departments, helps us coordinate not only with at the state level, but also at the federal level and at the local level. So it helps us to direct all of our states' strategies concerning PFAS. And it's been very successful. We've actually got a number of states around the country that are modeling their efforts for PFAS after our MPART team. So, but what is PFAS? PFAS are per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It's a family of chemicals. When we say PFAS, we usually are referring to the whole family of chemicals. We know there's at least 5,000, 7,000, 8,000, depends on who's counting, different compounds that we know of that are made in this particular structure. They have very strong carbon-fluorine bonds. So that bond is what makes it so unique, because it makes it very, very stable fairly indestructible. It takes some very high heat to break it apart. But what makes it so useful and why it's been used so much is because it does repel water, oils, fats, and greases. So it has a lot of uses throughout our society in different manufacturing settings. So it was started in the 1940s, we think, and has developed from a couple of very specific industrial uses to widespread, consumer good uses now. So some of those uses, as you will see here, apparel, we all can think of our Gore-Tex, we can all think of our rain jackets that are waterproof. We've got all kinds of things from our pharmaceuticals, electronics, our healthcare and hospitals, but the one that we're very familiar with in a lot of cases is our aqueous film forming foam, AFFF for short, and that refers to our firefighting activities. Those fires that are very hot and have petroleum type compounds in them would require this type of foam to actually put out the fire. So it's required on our airports, our large refineries and other things. So we have a lot of issues with AFFF around the state, but there's a lot of different uses for PFAS in our society that we don't even think about, but they are there. So, but why are we really concerned about PFAS, right? Not only is it a very highly used compound, it is also very widespread. We find this family of compounds in a lot of different things. So we have pretty widespread PFAS impacts across our country. And we know that they just don't biodegrade. You can't, PFAS by itself, PFOS especially by itself, is not going to biodegrade over time in the natural environment. What it does though is it can bioaccumulate in our bodies. It can bioaccumulate in fish. It can bioaccumulate as it goes up the food chain. And so it's very important that we understand how it does that and what the health effects are. We know that there are some health effects for PFAS right now. We don't have a wealth of knowledge, but we know that there's already some documented health effects that Rosa's going to tell you about here. The other thing we need to know is we need those federal standards. So we don't have national standards for PFAS. EPA is not designated as a hazardous substance yet, but Michigan has taken the initiative to do some of that. So I'll talk about that here in a minute. The other thing, and this slide got kind of big. The other thing that you will see here is that we have a whole bunch of PFAS type situations in our normal daily lives. So you might have a home here that might be getting drinking water out of the ground, but that groundwater might be impacted from a variety of different sources. You could have PFAS that might be used in a typical industrial setting. They might be discharging their water to the wastewater treatment plant. They might be just taking products to the landfill. The wastewater treatment plant might be sending stuff out to the streams or over to biosolids. There's this whole cycle of PFAS in our ecosystem is very, very interconnected. And what's important to know is that our wastewater treatment plants are not designed to capture, to break down, or to be able to treat PFAS. So it's really important that we stop the PFAS before it gets to our wastewater treatment plants or before it gets into our biosolids or before it gets into our streams, our rivers, and our groundwater. And so that's what a lot of MPART has done, is really put that effort into making sure we stop the PFAS at its source, understand it, and then take care of making sure that it no longer gets out into the environment. And so we've taken some pretty significant actions, all because ultimately we want to protect these residential homes and make sure that your drinking water is protected. That's the important part. So the other thing that we've taken a pretty big initiative on is understanding our surface waters across the state. So we have done some pretty significant surveys of surface water bodies, of fish sampling, of looking at foam, looking at wastewater. How does PFAS get out into our streams? We see that PFOS seems to be the driver for a lot of our investigations. We see it building up in our fish. We don't always see high concentrations in the surface water, but we may see high concentrations in the fish. Foam usually has high concentrations because, again, that is a layer of PFOS that may be coming from a source, maybe coming from a tannery, maybe coming from an AFFF source. And so we do see those investigations going on around the state. Additionally, Michigan has actually taken the time to set our own drinking water standards, what we call our maximum contaminant levels, which are applicable to all 2,700 municipal water supplies across the state. And those standards are based on health recommendations that we got from our top scientists across the country. And so we have PFNA at 6 parts per trillion, PFOA at 8 parts per trillion, PFOS at 16, PFHXS at 51, Gen X at 370 parts per trillion, PFBS at 420, and PFHXA at 400,000 parts per trillion. And remember, the reason those numbers are so different is based on the toxicity of each compound. So every single one of those compounds, although they're all in the PFAS family, they all have different toxicity values. And so it's important that we look at each one individually. And so MPART has participated in making sure we got drinking water standards. We have also then used those drinking water standards to have groundwater cleanup criteria, so that in the cases where we know we have groundwater contamination, those same drinking water criteria apply to the groundwater. And so you will see that based on those criteria, we now have 166 different sites around the state that are being prioritized and investigated based on their use of PFAS, their suspected source, their potential exposure for drinking water, residential well users. But we've got a lot of investigation going on. And when you look at this map, you might think, well, 166, that's a lot of sites. Michigan's in terrible shape. Well, actually, Michigan's actually in great shape, because I think the rest of the country will look just as bad, if not worse, and they will have done nothing about it, where we have actually taken actions at all of these sites to make sure we understand what drinking water users are at risk around these sites. We've taken efforts to mitigate those exposures and to begin really doing a deep dive and investigation. So lots to talk about. We'll go through the MPART website at the very end, so you know where to look. But just know that this is a pretty 50,000 foot overview of what's going on with MPART, and I could talk all day. So, but I will save you from that and hand it over to Rosa. Rosa Hyman is our toxicologist with DHHS, and Rosa's going to talk to you about PFAS and health. Rosa, you want to take it over?
Thank you, Amy. So like Amy said, I'm Rosa Hyman, and I'm the toxicologist from Ndshs. The first slide have my information. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email or call me. Next one, please. So first, I'm going to talk about the role of Ndshs and the local health department. And our role is to understand the health concern that the community is facing. For that, we developed a plan to investigate and address the health risk. In this plan, EGLE leads the site investigation, and Ndshs and the local health department leads the public health planning and response. We also evaluate PFAS exposure to residents in the community, in where we recommend public health actions as needed. Next one, please. So how people can be exposed to PFAS? So the main way in which a person can be exposed to PFAS is by swallowing the PFAS or by ingesting the PFAS. For example, by drinking contaminated water or by eating fish caught from water contaminated by PFAS. So once we know that there are fish, that there are lakes or rivers that have PFAS, especially PFOS, because we know PFOS can accumulate in fish, We sample the fish of those particular lakes and rivers. And if we found PFAS in fish, we issue something that is called It's Safe Fish Guidelines for those specific rivers and lakes. Another way in which a person can be exposed to PFAS is by incidental swallowing of contaminated soil or dust. And we may see this more in children because of the hand-to-mouth behavior. Also, by eating food packaging material containing PFAS, using some consumer products. But it's important to know that PFAS absorption through the skin is typically not a concern. So you can keep using your water to wash your clothes, to clean the house, to clean your dishes, or to use the shower. Next one, please. Most of the people in the United States have some levels of PFAS in their blood. Here we see a study done by Ndhs. In this study, they studied these four PFAS: PFOS, PFOA, PFHXS, and PFNA. What they did is that they studied these PFAS in the blood, and we can see the results here. The y-axis represent the average levels of PFAS in blood, and the x-axis represent years. So what we see here is that we see a decrease of these PFAS over time. There is a decrease of PFOS of around 80%, and there is a decrease of PFOA of around 60%. And the reason why we see this decrease is because around 2002, industry decreased the use or the manufacture of these chemicals, especially PFOS and PFOA. So when you have less production of these contaminants, people are going to be less exposed. Therefore, they're going to have less absorption of these contaminants in their blood. Next one, please. There are some health effects that have been associated with PFAS. For example, reduced fertility, high blood pressure or preeclampsia in pregnant women, a small decrease in infant birth weight, high cholesterol, especially total cholesterol, and LDL cholesterol, also known as bad cholesterol. Next one, please. Other health effects that have been associated with PFAS are thyroid disease, liver damage, decreased immune system response to vaccines, and there are some certain cancer that also have been associated, for example, kidney cancer and testicular cancer, but these ones have been associated only with PFOA. It's important to know also that if you have been exposed to PFAS, that doesn't mean that you're going to develop health effects immediately. Usually people need to be exposed for a long period of time to high levels of PFAS to be more likely than the average person to develop health effects in the future. Next one, please. For us to make our public health recommendation, we have different things that we consider. And those things are the Ndshs comparison values, the residential wall results, and we evaluate those ones individually and collectively. Also the site-specific information, like for example, the source of the or the geology. Next one, please. So what is the Ndshs comparison value? So the Ndshs comparison value is the lowest number of the Ndshs public health drinking water screening level and the MPAR health-based value, also known as MCL. It's important to know that both of these numbers are set to protect everyone, including those ones that are more at risk. For example, the fetuses and the breastfeed babies. Next one, please. So here are the Ndshs comparison values. And for PFOS, we have that the number is 8 part per trillion. PFOA is 8 part per trillion. PFNA is 6 part per trillion. PFHXS is 51 part per trillion. PFBS is 420 part per trillion. PFHXA is 400,000 part per trillion. And Ndhs is 370 part per trillion. Next one, please. So we also evaluate your results. So once we receive your result, we compare your result with the Michigan comparison values. So that's the way we evaluate the result individually. For example, in here, we see houses with different colors. So when we evaluate those houses individually, we see that there are some houses that were non-detected. Those ones are the blue ones. And then we see other houses that have levels of PFAS lower than the comparison value. Those ones are the yellow ones. And then we see other houses that have exceedance of the Michigan comparison values. Those ones are going to be the red ones. So that's the way we compare the result individually. But we also compare the results collectively. In the first example, we see a yellow house that is surrounded of blue houses. So that tells us something because we see that low levels of PFAS in the middle, and then we see no levels of PFAS there surround that house. We can say that maybe there are no high levels of PFAS. There is no high source of PFAS in the area. The second example, now we see a yellow house that have low levels of PFAS, but this time is surrounded of houses that have very high levels of PFAS. So that tells us something too. That tells us that they may be there a high source of PFAS in the area. And because we don't know if levels of PFAS may fluctuate over time, for that yellow house in the second example, we may take a more preventive approach and provide alternative source of water. Next one, please. Another thing that we consider is the site-specific information. For example, do we know the source? Is the contamination because a landfill, the use of a triple F? Also the geology. Is your well located in clay or is your well located in sand? How deep is your well? Is a shallow well or is a deep well? Or the plume. Is your house located in the plume of the contamination? Next one, please. So once we have all that information and we evaluate the information, then we make our public health response actions. And those public health response actions could be first, no public health action necessary. Second, we may recommend a filter or use alternative source of water. And why we do that? Well, maybe we need more time to conduct the investigation. Or second, because, well, we don't know if levels of PFAS may fluctuate over time, like the yellow house in the second example. Or the third thing is that we may just give education. We may provide people with information about PFAS in drinking water. Next one, please. So thank you. And now I'm going to let you with Kimberly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Etheridge. I'm the site lead. I work in Eagle's Remediation and Redevelopment Division, and my email and my phone number are listed on there. I'm going to elaborate on what Rosa just described as what we look for and take into factors in a PFAS investigation as it applies to the history of this site and how we got to where we are as far as the specific site investigation here. So the first thing I wanted to do is let you know about where this is. So the red teardrop on this slide is the former Falk Road landfill. It is just west of I-75. It's in between the Holly Road and the Grange Hall Road exit. And east of that is a community called the Holly Hills community. Then a little further east of that is Holly High School. And then if it's not on the map, but if we went to the west and south a little, we actually have the village of Holly, which is within the larger township of Holly, or really altogether known as Holly. Next slide. So I had wanted to kind of get a timeline and explain how we got to where we are as far as Eagle's Site Investigation and Remediation Division goes. And along the way, we have had there's obviously other divisions and departments that have been working on this investigation. So I'm going to be speaking mostly to what has been happening as far as site investigation of soil and groundwater go at the former landfill. So the brief history of it is that which we acronize this as the former Falk Road Landfill, or FFRL. And it has historically been used as a dump or a landfill. Don't so much want to call it a landfill because it operated from 1927 to the 1980s. This has not been regulated as a licensed landfill. So basically that's why, for the most part, it is regulated at this time as a former landfill under our cleanup division instead of with our materials management division. So it was also used as a shooting range around the 80s. Part of the southern property has also been investigated, but it is not our specific area of interest because most of the soil and groundwater levels that we see there are below exposure criteria that Part 201 regulates at. The site, like I said, was used as a soil shooting range, and samples of soil and groundwater indicate that hazardous substances remain from past use of the property, and thus this property is known as a facility pursuant to the cleanup law in Michigan, which is Part 201 environmental remediation, and that's part of Act 451 of Michigan's Natural Resource and Environmental Protection Act. More collectively called Part 201, I'll be saying through the slides. So 1994 was when the preliminary investigation was done. Surface water, residential wells, and some soil samples were collected. Metals results made this a Part 201 facility, and we, as RRD, at that time was probably called DEQ, it became a Part 201 facility. I want to point out that between 1994 and 1996, these investigations were done. Some of the dates on the data span between 1994 and 1996. So that's why we have that broader range of about a 2-year time that the landfill closure investigation was done by Holly Village. It was done by Holly Village because Holly Village has owned this property since 1927. It operated a dump at the property. So it is located in Holly Township, but the Holly Village is considered the owner and thus the party that has been considered responsible for continuing an investigation. And we've been working with the Village of Holly and with the Township of Holly on the matter. So between 1994 and 96 was the preliminary investigation. The hydrogeologic study was done for the landfill in 1996. And that's been an evolving thing. We are still and continue to in the future investigate the hydrogeology as we make the decisions that Rosa was explaining in the last slide. So in about 2019, this came back on Eagle RRD's radar. At that time, Oakland County Health Department collected drinking water samples from 2 residents that lived near the landfill for non-PFAS compounds. Those were metals and VOCs. And then in 2020, PNAs were added. At that time, in 2019 and 2020, although we did not yet sample for PFAS, we sampled for the non-PFAS contaminants. And those were considered below detections for drinking water criteria. There were some issues with naturally occurring arsenic, and there was some iron and some hardness detected. And the residents were given some informational materials on how to deal with that in your drinking water. So in February 2020, Eagle RRD asked the village to sample groundwater for PFAS and other common landfill parameters. pursuant to Part 201, excuse me. And in July 2020, the village sampled the groundwater at the landfill. Next slide, please. In November 2020, Eagle received the complete report from the village that summarized sample results and proposed next steps. Excuse me for a moment while I get my slides, my notes here. Okay, and then in December 2020, Eagle and, I'm sorry, this is important, I'm skipping it. So in between November and December of 2020, Eagle was made aware of this 1996 hydrogeologic report, and it brought to light some information that Eagle did not have in its files, and it was very valuable data to get, and we use that going forward to continue in our decision-making process. Including in December 2020, Eagle and the village visited the landfill and located some of the newly discovered groundwater monitoring wells that were noted in this 1996 report, but we were not aware of the wells being there, and thus the village had not sampled those wells. They had sampled a subset of wells that they knew about. And then after that report was submitted, we then found some additional wells. Eagle obtained funding for sampling some of those additional groundwater monitoring wells. This is on the landfill in January of 2021. Next slide. And I will say that the monitoring wells are the test wells, if you will, on the landfill. That's in comparison to residential wells that are off-site of the landfill. So for the most part, when I'm saying monitoring wells, I'm talking about on-site test wells. And when I say residential wells, I'm talking about off-site actual water wells that the community's using. So from March 8th to 9th, 2021, after we got our funding to assist with some of the financial, the finances of the sampling with the village, Eagle did, put forth some money to do some additional samples. We collected 32 samples at 24 of the groundwater monitoring wells on the landfill. And then in March of 2021, also residents conducted a privately funded drinking water sampling event from 4 neighboring residential wells around the landfill. According to the lab report Eagle was provided with, 3 of the 4 wells were non-detect. This was for PFAS and non-PFAS. However, right now I'm just speaking to the PFAS analytes that were reported. One of the residential wells, or the offsite home well, exceeded the PFAS criteria of the analyte PFOA. The PFOA drinking water criteria in Michigan is 8 parts per trillion, and that residence well had a measurement of 18 parts per trillion of PFOA. That resident was provided a filter short after. Next slide, please. So in April of 2021, after the knowledge came to be that there was a residential well that had a PFAS concern in it, Eagle conducted residential well sampling of 10 homes around the landfill. It included resampling of the 4 residential wells that were privately funded for sampling in March of 2021, and then 6 other homes that were around the landfill. And on April 30th, 2021, Eagle received residential well results for all 10 homes. 9 of those homes were non-detect for PFAS analytes, all PFAS analytes sampled. The 1 home that had the previous detection of 18 parts per trillion of PFOA had a detection of 19 parts per trillion of PFOA. And at that time, we evaluated the results, and Eagle, DHHS, and Oakland County Health Department have developed a public health action plan to more formally describe what our path will be going forward. Next slide, please. So this is a map of the monitoring wells on site and the residential wells off site, and the PFAS exceedances and detections and non-detections. So the green shading will be where we have no detections of the PFAS analytes that are sampled for commonly. The yellow will be the areas where there were detections of PFAS analytes, but they do not exceed our Part 201 drinking water criteria, nor do they exceed the surface water, groundwater to surface water interface criteria, or what we call the GSI criteria. So the yellows are detections, but not above those. The reds are sample areas where we detected one or more PFAS analytes above drinking water criteria or GSI criteria. And the triangles on this are showing the on-site monitoring wells that are set at different depths around the landfill so that we could get a picture of what shallow versus medium versus deeper groundwater levels, PFAS levels were. And then the circles and squares are your off-site residential wells. They are set at various depths within the aquifer. Around some of the shallowest ones are about 43 feet below ground surface. The deeper residential wells are about 80 to 100 feet. And then we're denoting on here the type 1 community water supply well that is supplying the Holly Hills community. They have one well and they provide water to all of the homes from that one well. The sampling of that, and that's to comply with state law, they're required for all type 1s supply wells to sample for PFAS and other analytes, of course. They were sampled in June 18th and in January 2021, and the green does denote that they have not had detections of PFAS in that type 1 supply well. It is not on the map, but well, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a water sampling, surface water sampling. So when I was talking about the GSI, the groundwater to surface water interface criteria, that can play into how groundwater can travel from a source into a surface water. And we have samples in the Shiawassee River from September of 2020. PFAS and PFOA were both non-detect in these two samples. We do not have any fish PFAS data for nearby lakes or the Shiawassee River near Holly. I do want to denote that there are abilities to have your surface water, if you live on a lake or around a lake or a stream and you're concerned about seeing any kind of foam or whether or not you have PFAS in your water, that you can request to have the water tested in those lakes. You would do so through the Eagle My Waters webpage, and that is in the PFAS website as well. So I described the Holly Hills communities. Type 1 community well has been sampled for PFAS in 2018 and 2021, non-detect. They have an annual monitoring plan going forward. The Village of Holly's type 1 supply well that is on Bush Lake has been sampled for PFAS in July of 2018 and December of 2020, and both of those sampling events were non-detect for that village public water supply. So our next steps in RRD and collectively in Eagle and collectively with the liable Village of Holly and the Holly Township and the community is going to be to continue discussing next steps. This is an ever evolving site evaluation and investigation. We hope to continue moving forward to develop a conceptual site model that gives us more information about groundwater flow, groundwater velocity, whether or not we need deeper monitoring wells offsite. Right now, we just have test wells on site, whether or not we would need them offsite. But in the interim, to address the PFAS residential exceedance in the one well that we found south of the landfill, we will be sampling 3 additional residential wells near the one residence with the PFOA exceedance. And with the map that we showed previously, if you wouldn't mind putting that map up again, I'd appreciate it. This one. So in the blue box right here, these are 3 residences that Eagle plans to ask for consent to sample their well. We take the sample from an untreated water spigot outside. Before treatment is what we ideally want to get a sample of. So our next step out is going to be to these 3 homes, as long as they allow us to do the sampling. Sampling will be at no cost to them, and we would give the results as soon as we have them available. So that's what our immediate next step is. And then a more down the road next step is to work with the village on what they can investigate, and then possibly work with them and see what we can also use state resources to investigate, to try to develop a really robust, trusted conceptual site model for the plume.
All right, thank you, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
We're just about to questions and answers, so you can just leave your camera on because you're going to get called on first probably. Jim, you want to jump in and remind people, and then we've got one more slide on Citizen Advisory Work Group, but why don't you remind people how they can ask questions?
Yeah, thanks, Abby and Kim. So if you have a question tonight, you can type your question into the question box on your Zoom toolbar there. You can also click the raise hand icon and we will unmute your microphone so you can ask your question if you'd rather do it that way. For those of you that are on the phone, and there looks like there's about 5 or 6 people on the phone listening in, you can hit #2, and that'll raise your hand and we will call on you by your phone number. And you can ask a question that way.
All right, thank you for that. Really quickly, I will just mention that I know I saw a number of my Citizen Advisory Work Group members that are on the phone or on the webinar tonight listening in. And our Citizen Advisory Work Group is a really special piece of MPART. So as I said, MPART helps us to collaborate all the way from the federal level down to the local level. And so these are citizens who have gathered together from different impacted communities from PFAS around the state. And they help us keep our perspective of how do we engage and empower communities? How do we make sure we're messaging to communities correctly? How do we educate the general public so that they aren't surprised by a PFAS, but that they know that they have tools and opportunities to be able to sample their wells, understand the results, reach out to local health, Department of Health and Human Services and all these things. So our Citizens Advisory Work Group is a really special piece of MPART, and they are actually on listening tonight to help us improve our process, help discover new ways that we can engage our public better. So I welcome them all here. Additionally, as I said, our MPART team is made up of 7 different agencies. So we've got EGLE, we've got Department of Agriculture, we've got Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Transportation, DNR, LARA, which is our licensing and regulatory affairs, but that's actually where the fire marshal is housed. So all things fire marshal are here. And then our Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, they have several different guard bases around the state that they have active sites. And so they're definitely involved in helping to assess and work through the process of cleaning those sites up too. So what I will tell you here is if you type in MPART into your Google browser, you'll find it. If you click on the MPART page, you can jump right into the MPART web page. The popular pages here, of course, are the PFAS sites, our Citizens Advisory Work Group that I just talked to you about. We have lots of information on PFAS and drinking water for private residential well owners. If you're not part of this investigation, but you just want to check your well just to be sure, there's testing opportunities here or other information. We have a ton of information out here on the website. The other thing that Kim was alluding to is if you see PFAS foam on a lake, there is an opportunity to report it through the My Waters webpage so that we're made aware of that foam. Surface water testing is done separately based on we're really looking at that, prioritizing that sampling as we go around the state. A lot of surface water sampling has already been done. And then there's information on PFAS and fish. So a lot of information, really great site. But what I will show you tonight is if you go under the PFAS list of sites, and then you go under F for former, you could also put it in the thing. And of course, it's on the second page. Tell me you're seeing this page, right? You're still seeing my web page, right?
Yep, we're seeing it.
Okay, good.
And I put in the chat the direct link to this website.
Oh, good. Okay. So why am I not seeing it? It's there. Former Chrysler, Ford.
I have to refresh your screen. That's what I had to do.
Probably. Anyways, you click on any one of these, and when you find the right one, it'll show you the maps. It'll give you the information. It'll show you some of the results. And we will keep this up to date as we get additional sample results. As Kim is out there doing the next steps, she's going to keep this page up to date. And you guys can check it to see when you get actual results. So so we've got there's a ton of information here. So I will leave it at that because we've got questions. And we'll go back to, let me go stop sharing for a moment. And I will reshare the presentation because I think we want to talk from the actual, there we go. All right, so you should be seeing, now I'll be seeing the slides again. And I will go back to the site map because I think that'll probably be the best thing to talk from. So, all right. So Jim, have we got any questions out there?
Yes, we do. We've got a couple people that have typed some questions in, and I see some hands raised too. So looking at my typed in questions here, these first two kind of go together, and I think Kim, you already addressed this. This came in before you talked about it, but are the wells in Holly Hills going to be tested?
The little green cross here is the Holly Hills supply well. So that supply well has lead lines that go out to each home. So I know that they're doing some development in a second phase here. When I drove by the site, it does look like each one of those spots has its own stick-up well, but that is actually just the connection of the water lines all the way back to this type 1 supply well. So they will be tested, and they have been in 2018 and 2020, but it will be a sample from that one well because it's kind of like a smaller municipal supply, that like I don't have a well at my house, but I get my water from the municipal supply. That's kind of in a smaller subset how the Holly Hills will go, is that they'll continue to sample from that one well. And that one well was permitted for the expansion that is happening at this time.
Yep. Okay.
And I think it's probably important to mention, Kim, that the Holly Hills Mobile Home Park is regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act by Eagles. So it'll continue to have to be tested and have regular monitoring, even as they, even with or without the expansion, that would be part of their normal requirements.
This next person is asking, how can I get my well checked either by Eagle or privately? So I'm assuming here, if they're not part of the Eagle testing process that you just described, how else would they go about getting their well tested?
Well, the PFAS or the MPART websites do have a link, and I don't know exactly how to get to it, but Abby might know exactly the answer. But there are several different labs that you can pay for your own water well sampling. Eagle's Water Quality Lab is one of them. So you can get a testing kit, and it would have instructions and bottles, and you would take a pre-treatment. So you would want to take it from outdoors before your water softener, before any kind of osmosis system you have, because we do really want to read from the non-treated water faucet sample. So Abby, if you have anything else to add to that, I know that, the Eagle Lab does do it, and then there are some private labs out there that also do.
Yeah, there is a whole list of the Eagle Lab and the private labs that do certified PFAS testing. It's really important to make sure that the lab that you're using is a certified lab for drinking water, because that's really important to make sure your data is qualified in that manner. The other thing I will say is that if, as Kim is going through her investigation, if it looks like additional drinking water wells, additional residential wells need to be sampled, we will continue to reach out to residents as that investigation progresses. So we're going to do this in an iterative fashion, in that we're going to follow the data and we're going to see where it leads us. Right now, we've got the one house with some concentrations over for PFOA. We're going to continue to follow that data with the houses closest to it. If those houses look like they also have concentrations, then we will continue to step out. But right now we're going to start with those three. If it sounded like that particular question was for a house that might have been off to the west of this, if it looks like for some reason we suspect that there might be something going more to the west, then we would step out. But I think we're going to continue to try to accumulate as much data as we can, and base our next steps on the science and the data as it goes.
Right.
I did also want to add, even though we are talking about PFAS in the majority tonight, as far as non-PFAS sampling goes, that I did describe that we were conducting at 2 homes in the area, we are going to cast that net a little wider, and we are this year, it follows an annual sampling plan, and this year we will be sampling several of the additional homes around the landfill. We will go to, I believe the number is 18 instead of 2 that we'll be going to. So you would receive, if you are within this, immediate vicinity of the landfill, you'll receive a postcard from Oakland County Health Department saying that they will be in your area soon to sample your well. And then, they will, when they show up, then they'll come let you know that they're there, and they'll be taking it from the outside spigot. And then you would receive results from the Oakland County Health Department on your samples of non-PFAS. And those are sampled by the Eagle Lab again. Even though it's not a PFAS water quality testing, it is, it is relevant and important to, test around the landfill for that as well.
So Kim, when you say non-PFAS, let's just be very clear. So that would be some of the metals, some of the heavy metals like the arsenic. Are there other volatile organic compounds that we are finding here, or is it strictly mostly metals?
We did not see any volatile organic compounds, neither exceeding drinking water criteria or other criteria at the landfill, nor in the 2 residential well samples that we have taken. We did not exceed any criteria for PNAs or semi-volatiles or metals off-site. Now, on-site, there have been some metals exceedances of the drinking water criteria. Those, some of the arsenic is naturally occurring. There was some, let me see, look at my notes. There was iron, there was lead, magnesium, and vanadium were the levels, were the metals that we observed detections of on the landfill property in groundwater. But again, they did not exceed drinking water criteria, but we will continue to sample those and watch. And that is why we decided to cast that net a little wider to do some community sampling of non-PFAS. So that will be volatiles, PNAs or semi-volatiles and metals that we will be sampling offsite this spring.
And that's more of a precautionary step, correct, Kim?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
All right, thanks. We're going to go to some of the people that have their hands raised. And this first person is on the phone with the phone number ends in 6603. So I just unmuted your line. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, hi. I live just west of the site on Rice Lake, and we're downhill from that. And I know you mentioned Bush Lake is testing pretty positive, you know, like didn't have much of a problem. But we're much closer than Bush Lake. And I'm wondering if any of the homes around the lake have been tested, or the lake water itself. I do a lot of swimming.
Sounds like we might have lost her. So
I did not. Hello, are you there?
yeah, hello. Yeah, we lost you after you were talking about swimming, doing swimming in the lake.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I have a neighbor that fishes all the time, and you know, the lake is used quite a bit. And I just concerned if I wasn't able to see the map because I'm on the phone, so I don't know where that one house that tested negative, you know, poorly, is located in relation to my house and the lake. So I'm just curious if there's been any testing, or if we could be included when they do the testing.
So just to follow up with your question there, the house that was had a positive detection for PFAS was actually on Falk Road, right, Kim? Just south of where we think the old dump is. So all the homes, there was 2 homes. This is Rice right here, right, Kim?
Yes, it does.
So there's 2 homes in between Rice Lake and Bush Lake that were on non-detect. And then there's another house on the northeast corner of Rice Lake that was non-detect. So we don't suspect anything in that direction. We do have some monitoring wells on the dump, but again, fairly lower levels. So we're going to continue to monitor those and see what we see.
Yeah, I'm concerned because it's a spring-fed lake, and you know, the underground waters and things like that, you know, possibly would be, you know, shifting our way because we're lower than the dump site area, and that's kind of my concern.
Okay. Well, and I think that's why it's important to continue to understand. So Kim's got some additional work going on to understand groundwater elevation. And she's, you know, continuing to evaluate the data that just came in with these monitoring wells. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question. All right, so we're going to go. There's a couple questions related to that I want to get to really quick here. This person lives north of the landfill, and they're worried about surface water runoff from the site. And we see a film on our surface water that runs across the site. He's also saying, when will we do surface water testing?
So I don't know, Kim, is any of the surface water on the landfill itself connected up to the north? Do we have streams that run that direction?
There are a number of small ponds and streams that do run on the landfill. And then north of the landfill offsite, there is a wetland area, and, you know, the surface water, or I'm sorry, the groundwater is very shallow up by where the, just east of Rice Lake, where the green dot and the yellow triangle are. That yellow triangle sample that was taken at about 1 to 2 feet below ground surface. So yes, we are watching that, and this is all part of our conceptual site model that we will be continuing to evaluate that shallow groundwater, and if need be, do some additional test wells offsite. Also, you know, there is the ability, I don't have this funded yet, but there is sometimes an ability for the cleanup group to do some surface water sampling, but for the most part, we leave that up to the surface water or the water bureau or the water division. But the answer is yes, we will be continuing to look at some of these shallow groundwater phenomenon and these ponds and streams that are, right next to the Rice Lake and the Bush Lake, and, probably sending some water that way.
All right. So at this point, they're not doing any surface water testing. You're saying that's
No, not at this point.
What about the other
Whoever-
question you had about the film that they're noticing on some of the
There's,
streams?
So let's go back real quick. The 1 to 2 foot sample, that's pretty close to ground level. So that
Mhm.
is, we wouldn't call that, that might be perched water, that might be surface water. But that would be a pretty good indication of what you would find at the surface. So there's a lot of different ways that we can have films on surface water bodies. Some of it's biological, some of it's natural. I don't think we saw anything in these PFAS results that gave us any concerns that we were going to see high levels of PFAS foam developing on lakes or on any of these surface water bodies. But again, I think, Kim's intending to try to scrape together some more money to do some additional assessment out here. Anything you want to add to that, Kim?
Well, no, and we would be doing the additional assessment in conjunction with the village, Holly Village. They are, responsible for doing some of the investigations. So, we'll be having continued talks about, where they end and where we begin as far as the investigation goes. But yes, we do want to look at the risks in soil and groundwater and surface water in the area.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks. Going to my hands raised. Derek has got his hand raised. So Derek, you can unmute your mic and ask your question.
Yes, my question is about the individual who received the filter. Will that be a continued thing for him at no cost or her at no cost up until a final determination is made on what will be done with that house?
This is Rosa from the health department, and yes, that would be given to him with no cost until we can find a solution for the problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks for your question. Does the current filtration systems for arsenic work on PFAS?
This is Rosa again, and that depends. We need certified filters in order to filter PFAS. Not necessarily the filters that we have for arsenic will filter PFAS. If you want to know what filters can filter PFAS and are certified, you can go to the NPAR webpage. In there, they will have more information about their certification in order to have those filters. However, the filters that filter PFAS can also filter other contaminants like metals or VOCs.
I know that I have one on my kitchen sink that does do PFAS. It does do some volatile organics, and it will do some of the regular metals, the arsenic and that kind of stuff. But as Rosa said, you really want to make sure if you're going to buy, and they're really not that expensive, but if you're going to buy a filter specifically for PFAS, make sure it's certified for PFAS. And there are a number of them out there that have been tested and certified to bring those concentrations down. They say below 70. We know they actually do better than that in most cases. The efficacy of those filters is really quite good. So as long as you keep them in regular service, change them out when the manufacturer recommends, they shouldn't give you any trouble.
All right, and in the chat, we did drop some information in there about home filters, the website that we've established for that. I also put in there the website for the home lab testing that Abby mentioned earlier. So if you're interested, you could check that out as well. We do have another question on the board here. What depth below ground surface was the deepest cell in the landfill? Is the soil in the area sand or clay or a combination? So I guess there's two questions.
Yeah, It's yours, Kim.
We are still investigating the geology. I'll answer the last one first. Whether or not there is a confining layer in between a shallow and a deeper aquifer is something that right now is inconclusive. We do not have adequate soil borings to show us whether or not there is this confining layer or not. We'll also be continuing to look at the groundwater direction and groundwater characteristics to try to determine what kind of hydraulic flow we may have if there is, say there is an unconfined aquifer out here, that what is the, you know, the risk that any of these groundwater data on the site, like the 3 red triangles that we see, whether or not that would someday flow off the site and impact any residential wells. So we anticipate on conducting a more robust hydrogeological investigation at the site and around the site. As far as the cells, we don't have much information about what was dumped on the site, when it was dumped, or who dumped it. And any information that is out there, if anyone does have any, please call me or email me and let me know. Even if you have old pictures, if you've lived around there for a long time and you have pictures, it's always helpful. It's really hard to piece together what happened at a former dump if it wasn't regulated, particularly who dumped what there. I did see from some of the soil borings that there were some metal lathe cuttings that were just a small, you know, layer of some soil borings. And we did do the groundwater sampling in that area. I believe it was kind of more in the center, just below where those 2 red triangles are, where the 3 yellow triangles are on that map, more to the south. Yeah, thank you. More to the south and the west. That's kind of where, from what I saw in the soil borings, the limited amount of soil borings that were done in 1994, that did have some metal lathe cuttings. But then again, we did not see any kind of volatiles, any kind of like PERC or PCE or TCE or anything that would indicate, you know, any degreaser was used or dry cleaning solvents, nothing like that. So, you know, it'll all be part of our investigation ongoing.
Mm-hmm. And Kim, do you remember off the top of your head, what was the highest concentration of any PFAS that we had in these 3 monitoring wells?
The monitoring well 22, and I'm sorry, I can't remember. It's one of those 2 right there. That one of those are 23 and 22. Monitoring well 22 had a PFOS exceedance of 37 parts per trillion. That exceeds the drinking water criteria of 16 parts per trillion and the GSI criteria, that's the groundwater surface water protection, of 12 parts per trillion. Mm-hmm. So that would have been our highest number.
And let me jump in, Kim, because you know, in having done PFAS work across the state and looking at different dump areas and PFAS, high strength PFAS sources, that's pretty low, still above our criteria, but it's a pretty low level for what we are now, you know, right now, at least that's our highest concentration. And so, you know, knowing how a lot of these township municipal dumps happen, they just, you know, in the 20s, you just filled in a wetland, right? You filled in a boggy area with your trash, your dump, and whatever. Sometimes it was lit on fire, sometimes it wasn't, but it just kept accumulating over time. What we don't know, and what, you know, I think what you guys are all worried about is whether or not there were any industrial wastes. At least from this initial set of data, we're not seeing any groundwater concentrations that lead us to that point. But that's why we're going to continue to work with the village and follow up and make sure we can confirm that. So I think we've got some, you know, when we're worried about surface water testing, when we're worried about some of this other stuff, we want to keep all of these sample results in mind in the totality. So they tell us a picture. Kim's been talking about a conceptual site model. It's really important that we build that conceptual site model based on the sampling data, based on the information we know, but also based on the geology. And I think that's the one big piece that we are still trying to piece together. It's a pretty complex geological situation out here. So we'll leave it at that. We have one more question.
Yeah, so I got another question that's come in again about testing the lakes. It's kind of a long, so I'll read it to you. There's a very long pipe that someone buried in the dump that leads to Rice Lake, which means it has been allowed to drain into Rice. We were told back in February 2020 that Rice Lake would be tested. It hasn't been yet. And now I find out I have to go online to My Water's webpage to apply. I should have been told this back in February 2020. So can you address the concerns this person has about, I guess, the pipes leading into Rice Lake and testing of Rice Lake?
Sure. If you could send me your email and I'll email you back and let you know. I have been sending the links to My Water's website to some of the concerned residents that live around the lake. It sounds like that I did not reach you. And if you would email me, I can get you that information.
But to be clear, if you have a picture of the pipe and you can locate it on a map, that would be even better, because then we can take a look and see what it is. If it's a surface water drainage or whatever it might be, we still have to base it on data. And we have surface water testing going on around the state. And so all of that work is prioritized because, we always have limited resources on what we can do. So the information on these lakes and on, potential fish sampling and stuff like that, we will share with our surface water division and then work to see what we can get done. But it's going to all be prioritized in what kind of information we have, because right now we have fairly good information around the lake, at least for drinking water, but we'll continue to work with them on any surface water sampling that might get done.
Mm-hmm. And please do send, if you see any if you see any foam this summer, please send me a picture. I have not received any pictures. There have been some complaints or some observations of foam that were said to be there, but the pictures really help to pinpoint, even especially if you are on the lake or fishing or anything, and you see some, take a pin of where you are, if you know how to do that on your phone, or if your phone has that capability. Even giving us the GPS coordinates is even more of a surefire way that we can go back and pinpoint that exact area where you observed it and take a sample. But pictures help a lot too. I will say that I did go out to the sampling that was our residential well and our groundwater sampling, both in February and in April. And even though it was just a very quick glance that I did at some of the spots around Rice Lake, I did not see any large foam areas. Now, that's not to say that there have never been any, or there, but I did not see a large foam area. But again, please take pictures and please email me if you do see something like that, either Rice Lake or Bush Lake.
All right, thanks, Kim. I did drop your contact information into the chat for people that might need to get a hold of you. All right, so we got a couple people with their hands raised. Mary, hold on a second. I'm going to unmute your line. So go ahead, Mary, you can ask your question.
This is Mary, and I would like to start off by saying thank you to the state and Eagle for doing the testing, taking up where Holly Village left off. I would like to question Kim's comment that there was one class 1 well at Holly Hills, because I've spoken to Gary at Brown Well Drilling, and there are actually 2 314-foot wells in the bedrock. And so that it's possible that you meant that only one of them was tested, but there are two that are there. The other thing I would like to comment on is that Bush Lake, Denise Trabick-Pointer, the toxic and remediation specialist with Sierra Club Michigan chapter, has found reports that Bush Lake, as well as two local branches of the Shiawassee River, are impaired with fish with PFOS. And the other question I do have is regarding a future community meeting. We do have multiple issues going on here as far as the Falk Road dump, but we also have the Holly Hills expansion, which could create problems with pulling contaminants when the water usage increases. Mike Wilczynski, the geologist, has done a geologic cross-section with Mark Taylor and feels that that is a definite possibility. The other thing is that Denise Trabick-Pointer also found in the My Waters report that the Eagle has 2 citations out to the wastewater treatment plant at Holly Hills for daily, weekly, monthly exceedances in 4 categories, both in 2019 and 2020, that were not reported by the wastewater treatment managers. So we do have multiple issues, including the Shiawassee River, and that also has not been tested as far as the effluent that wastewater treatment plant is dumping into the private wetland there. So I would like to know when we could get another community meeting dealing with all the different agencies and the multiple departments that are needed to address all of these issues with citizen participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Mary, the one thing I will clarify is there may be 2 really deep wells at the Holly Hills Mobile Home Park. Usually the sample was done from, when they do that sampling, they probably took it from a combined influent. So that might be why we have 1 sample result, but it might represent both wells. So, but we'll double check on that just to make sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe, please send me any information you have of the well drilling, because on the well viewer and in verifying with Water Bureau, who permitted the 1 well at the home park, it seems that there is only 1 well there. So if you do have information that shows that there is another well there, then please send it to us. And as far as a continued meeting, a lot of the other issues sounded like they are water discharge issues. So since I don't work in Water Bureau and never have, I wouldn't feel comfortable in answering any of that right now, but we will definitely forward those concerns on and get some answers back to you as far as the water effluent, if there certainly are ongoing effluent issues. I know that there were a couple of sightings that I saw in our record, in the records of in Eagle's RRD files from early 2000s, but nothing that exceeded any kind of permitted effluent criteria. So if you have that data, we'd like to see that and we'd like to follow up.
Okay, all right. Like I said, I got your contact information right in the chat. They can get a hold of you. We got another email or another person with their hands raised with the phone number, another phone person. Their ends in 3513. So just unmuted your line. You can go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. What is the relationship between the current capture zone for the wells in the village of Holly It's usually modeled 10, 15, 20 years out and so on, and the direction of the plume.
The village well that's on the other side of Bush Lake has a wellhead protection zone study from the early 2000s. And it indicates that just based on that study on that well, which is a deeper well, that your groundwater flow is west to northwest. And so it would be that anything at the landfill could potentially flow west to northwest because that is the direction of that deeper groundwater flow. A plume map around Holly Village, I do not have, and I am not, there's the environmental environmental mapper that Eagle has that would show you any kind of contaminants or contaminated sites in the village, which again is a little bit further west of this. And you could look at that and see if there's any kind of environmental concerns in the village.
This particular plume for this Falk Road landfill would not intersect with the expected intake for the Village of Holly water source. Correct, Kim?
Correct.
Because I think
and
we're
you
down.
have the
Let's go ahead.
and you have the mapping of the capture zone, correct?
It is a mapping of a capture zone based on a early 2000s wellhead protection study. So that is one thing that, yes, I do believe in that capture zone, but we also do want to do some additional hydrogeological investigations. It's become pretty evident that groundwater flow is not only to the west and northwest at this property, that we should be taking into account some shallower flow directions. But for the most part, yes, the wellhead protection zone study that was done when the village well was being considered, that's to me, I believe it's credible, and that's on our environmental mapper as well. If you put the layer on for wellhead wells and wellhead protection zones, you would be able to see that.
And Kim, if you can see my pointer, Village of Holly's well, withdrawal impact area would be in this direction, right? You said north.
It would be,
northwest.
yep. And the well, the well itself is just to the north and west of Bush Lake.
So up in here.
Up in that area, yeah.
So we wouldn't expect that these two issues would intersect at all.
No, and the village does sample not only for PFAS analytes, but they sample for non-PFAS analytes in their water supply well regularly to make sure that, their water supply is healthy and clean.
Thank you. We do appreciate that you are going to do
you.
additional hydrogeologic studies.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
All right. Got another question. Hand raised from Michael. Go ahead. I guess, yeah, Michael, it's coming up that it won't allow me to unmute you because it says you have an older version of Zoom. So this happens every once in a while. So you might have to log off, come back in, update Zoom, or you can type your question into the question box and we can get to it that way. So sorry about that. Next person with a hand raised, Bob. Bob, I just unmuted your line. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, thank you. Actually, I typed it in the question and answers. It was fairly simple. Okay. Mary Blanchard's been leading this for quite a long time. I saw her a year and a half ago at one of Alyssa Slotkin's events discussing this landfill. But she submitted a letter to AG, the Attorney General of Michigan, and to Eagle on 423 that made very specific claims regarding contamination of fish in the waters in the various local lakes. And some obvious transfer of pollutants from this government-owned landfill to nearby areas. And the report that I just heard seems to claim none of that exists. I mean, there was zero detections in the lakes and streams. So did they read Mary's report? And if they did, have they found problems with the facts that she came up with? And since you got me on the line, I would like to make one last comment, and that is that I read the GoFundMe account that these residents had to go and seek funds to test for PFAS over a year. It looks like it was quite some time ago, because the government that actually ran this landfill, a Michigan subsidiary, hasn't been able to keep records and doesn't know whether it's leaking or not. To force citizens to do that with all of the other money that's been wasted and spent on water infrastructure is just wrong. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. We will, if there's anything in Mary's letter, we haven't had I don't know that we've got it 3 weeks ago, but we will definitely go back through it. And if there's anything in there that we did not know, we'll definitely, Kim can reach out to Mary and make sure we've got that. I know that Mary talked specifically about having fish samples and some reports from Ndshs. So Denise, if you've got that information, if you could shoot that to Kim or myself, that would help. The information we have on the slides is what we know about and what we have currently that Eagle has done for sampling and that DHHS has done for fish studies. So if there's other information out there, we're certainly happy to consider it and look at it and include it as part of our investigation and assessment of the potential risks out here.
Great, thanks. Another hand up, Derek. Muting your line for you. Go ahead, Derek.
Hey, Jim. So just so you know, this is Derek, but I actually got Mike on the phone, so he can go ahead with this question.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, this is Mike Lachinsky with Pangea Environmental LLC, and I've been doing some geological work in the area for the Falk Road Group. I have a photograph of foam on the lake that I'll forward to you. Also, I've collected some residue after a foam event that I'd like someone to take a look at and evaluate. And I have a geological model developed for the landfill site based on the water well records. I'd be happy to share it with Eagle if they'd like to meet. I've developed some cross sections all around the site and have a pretty good idea of the geology and hydrogeology.
Okay. Do you know, Mike, how deep do you have any boring logs that show how deep the waste was buried?
I didn't hear that.
Oops, sorry, Mike. Do you have any well or information about how deep the waste was buried at the dump?
No, I don't. My focus was on the groundwater. I haven't looked at the depths of the waste. I believe there's a cross section developed by geodynamics that shows the deepest part of the waste, and also shows the pipe that someone was referring to being present. That drains water to Rice Lake.
All right. Yeah, send that over to us, Mike. We'll definitely want to take a look at it.
I don't know how deep the waste went, but I do have an understanding of the geology and groundwater. It's basically a sheet of glacial till overlying glacial outwash. That's the aquifer. So you basically have two units to be concerned with.
Yeah, that's why it's really important to understand how deep the waste went and which parts of the aquifer it might be impacting. So.
Oh.
All right.
Thank
you.
Mike.
All right. Thanks for your comment. Question. I am taking a look here to see if we have any more questions in our question box. There isn't. Oh, we got another hand up, so let me go to that one. So Stacy, you got a question. Go ahead, you can unmute, Stacy.
Hi, folks. How are you today? A couple things. First of all, arsenic is naturally occurring, but it also increases when you overpump on the aquifer. Holly Hills Class 1 wells, those are one of the big concerns Tim Carpenter had when he created these reports was the proximity, and he called out Clean Drinking Water Act 399, Part 812, where you must be 2,000 feet from the dump. We also have concerns that they excavated extensively the entire 900 feet, because I actually took a tape measure of that because we're crazy like that. But from where that blue house is, and I talked to her today, all the way to where the North Easement Road is, they went very deep, and it was extensive how much sand that they exposed. So not only did Mike Wilczynski, but Chuck Julian both walked the site, and we took pictures. I think we've shared them all with you. So, you know, the Clean Drinking Water Act, when they filled out their water supply permit, line 19, it says, is there soil contamination in proximity or adjacent? They checked no. So we have been raising, you know, our concerns with that, because the developer, we were told by Chris Donaldson that the developer is allowed to interpret that any way they wish. Well, why do you have it on a permit process and it asks the question if it is impertinent? We also know that that entire pond was filled in the middle there. I've sent maps to you guys, aerial views from 56, 67, and in 2012. When the VOC reports spiked for Holly Hills drinking water, where the little green X is up there, Chris Donaldson, everybody was kind of involved with that again, Cheryl Wilson, and they were concerned that the xylene and the handful of other chemicals were being pulled from the dump. They created a map that went the length of the Falk Road from where it's kind of an open field and down across to the, what way is that? To the east on East Holly. So we handed papers to all those folks today because we asked Kim Etheridge, and she said she forwarded it to Chris Donaldson, and nobody's responded. But who notifies all those folks that they might be at risk? You know, I'm part of the Citizens Advisory Group. I'm so grateful for them, and I'm grateful that, you know, it looks like people are starting to work with the community citizens and Eagle. And, you know, Abby, I hope you're, you know, going to take us in the right direction with this, because we need to get this one right. And I have a million more things I can share, and I also want to address, and it's been addressed, but not addressed, but concerns have been raised. See that area right in the middle where Holly Hills expansion is going? Why does nothing grow there? And if you look over there where the three triangles are in a row by the 22 and 23 back onto the Falk Road dump site, a little bit, yep, to the right there a little bit. So like that whole pond was filled in, and that's where the 1,000-foot pipe was put in. But that was a burn pit. So they used to burn all of that waste back in the day. And that's not real healthy, and it's not a really good thing. And the geology is complicated here. And that's why we should be taking every precaution to prevent the Holly Hills from the expansion from exacerbating this. And we do have a vernal pond. You can go all the way to the North Easement on the very far corner there, right by my little farm with Soapin. Yep, right there. The water crosses through there, goes up into the chain of lakes. So all those people are at threat, including Riviera Shores. And when they pave Holly Hills, all of a good portion, it's like 93% of what they're doing over there, and then they continue on to level that forest across from me, the flooding is going to compound dramatically, and all of this is important. So I know I threw a lot of things out there. I hope each of those kind of gets addressed. Or folks, I appreciate your time, but we need to get this right.
All right, thank you. Did you guys want to address some of those questions that were in there?
I think, Stacey, we'll continue to push them internally and make sure you get some answers to your questions. Like Kim said, you know, we're focusing on PFAS tonight. There's a lot of water resources issues here that and the drinking water issues with the permitting of wells and making sure it's in compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. And then you've got you know, issues with the wastewater treatment for the mobile home park as well. So all of those are additional issues that we're going to have to bring back to water resources, to drinking water, and make sure that they get addressed through those channels. But Kim will definitely work with her team and we'll push it and see what kind of answers we can get for you.
All right.
Agreed. And I will continue to emphasize that any of these type 1 community wells that do supply the drinking water to any of the residents, current or future, in the mobile home community or in the Holly Village, the type 1 water supplier is required by state law to continually sample their water. So we will continue to work with Water Bureau on that. Also, I'm particularly concerned about the effluent from the wastewater treatment reports that you may have from 2019. We're making these decisions data-driven. Data-driven decisions are really important here. And, we want to get this right too. And we do need some help from anyone who has any of this data to provide it. And we'd be very appreciative of that, that effort.
All right, thanks. Next hand up is George. George, go ahead. I just unmuted your line.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah, this is George Cullis. I'm the Holly Township Supervisor. In a letter that was dated April 6th from the Department of Environmental, Great Lakes and Energy to Yes Communities, their headquarters are in Farmington Hills, Michigan. And the letter is written from Chelsea Walsh, Environmental Quality Analyst out of your Warren District Office. She references several violations that are in occurrence during the past year. And on the second, well, actually at the bottom of the first page, she says, while the majority of these exceedances were not reported to the department as required, she then goes on and says a written submission shall be provided within 5 days. In the next paragraph, she says the permittee's failure to notify the Department of Non-Compliance was previously addressed in a violation which was issued back in 2019. Failure to report non-compliance denies the Water Resource Division the ability to protect public health and environment. Continued failure to report non-compliance as required by the permit may lead to escalated enforcement action. My question is, why wasn't a violation issued in this particular instance? And the second part of my question is, it tells them that they are to respond to the required action listed above by May 6th. I'm wondering if that response was received. Thank you.
That is a great question, George, and one I don't think that Kim or I have an answer to. So I think we will have to get back with the citizens group on that particular issue, because I don't think that we have information to answer that question as far as the violation notice or whether or not we actually received the required response, because today is what, the 10th? So that would have been last week, Thursday. So I don't know. Kim, you don't know, do you know off the top of your head?
No, I do not, but thank you for bringing it to our attention, and we'll follow up with our staff in the Warren District.
Yeah, I have a copy of that letter if you need it.
Yes, please. Thank you. I have not seen it yet.
Okay.
All right, thanks for that. Okay, Abby, I'm looking and I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
Her hand's raised.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So how about if I'll go back to the MPART final slide, because I think just like this says here about, the MPART team, I think all these issues require a team. They require everybody to collaborate, get the information together. Nobody has all the right answers, but if we work together to make sure we get the right picture, the right conceptual site model, get the right information on the geology, understand what it's going to do, then we can make better decisions and make sure we protect public health long-term, which is always our ultimate goal. So this is an iterative process. We'll continue to work at it. We'll continue to get more information. And like I said, if for the PFAS sampling, if it looks like additional work needs to be done, additional sampling needs to be done based on the next 3 homes that will be sampled, then we will definitely be reaching out and letting the community group know that that's what will be happening. So stay in contact with Kim. She's going to be your point of contact. But we've also got, if you need anything for health questions, feel free to contact Rosa. I'm always around. You guys know where I'm at, but really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for your passion, for your, your community activism, for protecting not only your homes in your community, but also, the people in the mobile home park and your greater citizens of the state. So thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Anything else, Kim?
No, what Abby said. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. All right. We will sign off. Everybody have a good night. As Jim said, this will be recorded. It's usually on our MPART website within a weekish. It's got to get transcribed and closed captioned, and then it'll get put out there. But look for the recording and look for the former Falk Road landfill to be put up on the MPART, or it's on the MPART website. I just needed to refresh my browser. So look for that, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.